Welcome back. You're watching SA Today with me, Unati Bagyaja. Let's take you back to this big story now. The Financial Action Task Force, the FATF, has placed South Africa on its grey list, meaning the country will be under increased monitoring regarding actions against money laundering, terrorist financing and proliferation financing. Greylisting also means the country has committed to resolve the deficiencies within agreed timeframes. Now, last year, Parliament passed 2 laws to address the flagged deficiencies, including the anti-money laundering and anti-terrorism financing legislation. Now, to help us unpack what this decision could mean for the country, we're now joined via Zoom by Dr Celeste Campher. She's a lecturer in the Department of Economics and Finance at the University of the Free State. Doctor, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Well, Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana, in fact, hinted of a possible greylisting during his budget speech. Now that we are here, how will this impact the country and, more importantly, the impact on foreign direct investment?
Okay, good afternoon, Unati, and good afternoon to your viewers. Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak to you guys today. So when I first wrote on greylisting in October last year, I did indicate that this action seems quite inevitable. So today's announcement is not really a surprise to many, but yet still disappointing. And as you've mentioned, why we've been greylisted, it is because the Financial Action Task Force has identified in 2021 already, has identified South Africa as a hub for money laundering activities and also for activities financing terrorism and corrupt activities. So on the back of this announcement, it's also important to note that South Africa is not the first country in the world to be greylisted. For those who don't know, we now join a group of nations such as Jamaica, Pakistan, the Philippines, Uganda, Morocco, just to mention a few. But the key is to not stay on this grey list for too long. So it's very important for South Africa, or for government now, to do what it needs to do in order to get us off this list as soon as possible. I know the minister in his speech on Wednesday already indicated, that they will be looking at having a review in June this year. And hopefully that will be successful. So what does it mean for South Africa now to be greylisted? It just means we are now under increased monitoring from the Financial Action Task Force in terms of all our financial and business transactions. It also means that we are now deemed as a high-risk jurisdiction to transact with. So in other words, there'll be additional steps required from foreign investors who want to transact with South Africa. And that, of course, places a huge administrative burden on these financial transactions, not to mention the costs involved. And unfortunately, these costs are not just restricted to big businesses and big investors, but it will definitely be felt by our small business sector as well. So in essence, if South Africa was a partner in a relationship with foreign investors, then this would definitely be deemed as a red flag in that relationship.
And I was obviously going to talk about just the hindrance, that this places in terms of, that increased monitoring of South Africa to foreign investment, especially at the predicament that we are in as a country where we need, that crucial investment. But let's talk about then some of the deficiencies that South Africa needs to then close, those gaps that they need to close. I mean, if you consider, that the country didn't meet its November 2022 deadline to prove that it is, in fact, addressing, some of those deficiencies mentioned, when it comes to improving its legal and regulatory framework against these crimes that you've also mentioned, like money laundering, etc. Can government, show that will, of getting us out of this predicament, and how soon can that be?
Yeah, so I'm an economist, so I'm not really an expert on the law, but I think there's 2 important things to consider here. For number one, we've been aware of the Financial Action Task Force intention to place us on the grey list since October 2021. Government really only started working on the legislation in August of 2022 and had it passed in January. So that's less than just about 6 months to amend very crucial legislation. So for number one, there was not enough time allocated to make sure that the amendments to these legislations are done effectively, and to consider the implications of these amendments. And then secondly, also, I think what also needs to be considered is, as much as these laws have been passed now, they will definitely have implications for small businesses. All transactions now will need to be investigated and will be monitored, and not all businesses can afford that. So there'll be, the implications in terms of the cost of capital in South Africa, which is something we also, like you mentioned, is something we don't need right now. There'll definitely be an increase in the cost of capital. And although there are global studies done on the impact of greylisting, these studies do show mixed results. But I do feel that for South Africa, due to the administrative burden that are now going to be imposed as a result of these laws, it's definitely going to increase our costs, and it's going to make, we'll be deemed now as not a prudent destination for offshore investments or for transactions with offshore partners.
Very quickly, Dr. Campher, before I let you go, what does this mean then for banks? I mean, you mentioned small businesses and the impact thereof. What does this then mean for banks and their correspondence, in terms of banking relationships? I mean, it's a question that you might not be able to answer, but do you have an idea?
Yeah, so thank you for saying that I might not be able to answer it, but I'll try my best to. Remember now, it's about managing relationships. Banks have relationships with their clients, businesses and personal clients as well. So they now have to increasingly monitor all the transactions with these clients. So it's a huge administrative burden. I'm not sure if, banks have and financial institutions have the capacity to deal with this. And, there's a number of laws just within the General Amendment Bill. There's a number of laws that have been changed as well. So it affects even like your Trust Control Act as well. So it's a whole new ballgame. It's new and foreign to us as South Africans, and not just as ordinary citizens, but to the business sector and the financial sector as well. So how we navigate our way through this is quite crucial. It's important to not rush through it and to consider all the implications, but at the same time, not to become complacent and relax in this grey-listed environment now.
Dr. Campher, I really do appreciate your time and your analysis. Dr. Celeste Campher, she's a lecturer in the Department of Economics and Finance at the University of the Free State. Of course, we'll continue to get analysis around this new decision. Of course, the Financial Action Task Force, the FATF, has placed South Africa on its grey list. We'll continue to monitor this story, and we'll get more analysis straight after this.